My name is Albert, and at 25 years old, I never thought I'd have to choose between my athletic scholarship and my family. The knee surgery I desperately needed was my only shot at continuing my track career, but my father canceled it last minute. Why? Because my younger sister Madison wanted to go on a European vacation that happened to fall during my recovery period. Little did he know that his decision would set off a chain of events that would change our family forever. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe button to support more real stories like mine. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where my childhood home sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees that turned brilliant shades of red and orange every fall. From as early as I can remember, I was always running, chasing after neighborhood kids, racing my bike down hills or sprinting through our backyard until my lungs burned. By the time I was 8, it became clear that I had a natural talent for track and field. My father, Thomas, was my biggest supporter. He never missed a single meet, even when it meant driving 3 hours after a full day at his accounting firm. I can still picture him standing at the finish line, stopwatch in hand, his face beaming with pride as I broke another personal record. Back then, I thought his dedication was purely out of love for me. Now I understand it was more complicated than that. Our family dynamic changed dramatically when my mother Elizabeth passed away from breast cancer when I was 12. The three of us, Dad, my sister, Madison, and I, were left to navigate a world that suddenly felt empty and unfamiliar. Madison was only 6 at the time, and perhaps that's why Dad's attention shifted so dramatically toward her. Where once he'd balanced his time between us, now, Madison became the center of his universe. I don't blame him entirely. Madison was young and needed that extra care. She also looked strikingly like our mother, the same honey blonde hair, the same bright blue eyes that crinkled when she smiled. Sometimes I'd catch Dad staring at her with a mix of love and grief that was almost painful to witness. As Madison grew up, though, the favoritism became more pronounced. When I needed new track shoes, Dad would hesitate over the cost. When Madison wanted horseback riding lessons, he signed her up immediately. When I brought home straight, as there'd be a nod of approval. When Madison managed to pull her grades up to B's, there'd be a celebration dinner at her favorite restaurant. Despite this, I managed to excel in track and field throughout high school. My specialty became the 400-meter hurdles, an event that requires both speed and technical precision. By my senior year, I was ranked 3rd in the state, which caught the attention of several college recruiters. When Westlake University, one of the top athletics programs in the Midwest, offered me a full scholarship, it felt like all my hard work had finally paid off. Dad seemed genuinely proud when I showed him the scholarship letter. "This is your ticket, Al," he said, using the nickname only he ever called me. "Your mother would have been so proud." It was one of the few times since her death that he'd mentioned her to me directly, and it meant everything. College life at Westlake was transformative. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who were as passionate about track as I was. My coach, Gregory Phillips, saw potential in me that even I hadn't recognized. Under his guidance, I shaved seconds off my times and refined my technique. By sophomore year, I was competing at the national level with whispers of Olympic potential if I continued to improve. Meanwhile, Madison was finishing high school back home. She'd grown into a beautiful, charismatic young woman who could charm anyone, especially our father. She'd decided against pursuing sports or academics seriously, instead focusing on her social media presence and what she called her personal brand. Dad never questioned this choice, instead funding her photography equipment, clothing hauls, and weekend trips with friends that she claimed were content creation opportunities. It was during my junior year at Westlake that the pain in my right knee became impossible to ignore. What started as occasional discomfort after particularly intense workouts evolved into a sharp, stabbing sensation that would wake me from sleep. I tried to push through it using ice baths, anti-inflammatory medications, and extra stretching, but Coach Phillips noticed my time slipping. "Albert, we need to get that knee looked at," he insisted after watching me grimace through practice one afternoon. "This isn't something you can just tough out." The university sports medicine department referred me to Dr. Harrison, one of the top orthopedic surgeons in the state. After a series of MRIs and physical examinations, his diagnosis was clear. I had a complex meniscus tear with early signs of cartilage damage. If we don't address this soon, Dr. Harrison explained his expression, serious, you're looking at potentially career-ending damage. The good news is that with arthroscopic surgery and proper rehabilitation, you should be able to make a full recovery. The recommended timeline was clear surgery during summer break, followed by 6 months of intensive rehabilitation. If all went well, I could potentially return for the latter half of my senior year season, just in time to demonstrate my recovered abilities to any professional scouts or Olympic team selectors. When I called my father to explain the situation, he initially sounded supportive. "Of course, we'll take care of this, Al," he assured me. "Your future depends on it." We discussed the financial aspects openly. My university health insurance would cover most of the procedure, but there would still be significant out-of-pocket expenses, around $5,000 for the surgery, copay, and specialized rehabilitation equipment I'd need during recovery. Additionally, I'd need someone to help me during the first few weeks post-surgery, as I'd be essentially immobile. "You'll come home," Dad decided. "I'll clear out the downstairs guest room so you won't have to navigate the stairs. Madison can help with driving you to physical therapy appointments." For the first time in years, I felt like my needs were being prioritized in our family. Dad even mentioned taking 2 weeks off work to help during the most critical phase of my recovery. I scheduled the surgery for June 15th, giving me a full 2 weeks after the end of spring semester to get home and prepare. What I didn't realize was that Madison had plans of her own plans that would soon collide catastrophically with mine. I returned home in early June, mentally preparing myself for the surgery. The house looked exactly as it always had, the same faded blue exterior, the same creaking third step on the front porch, the same family photos lining the entryway. Madison's presence, however, was notably amplified. Her belongings seemed to have migrated into every common area: makeup on the kitchen counter, shoes scattered by the door, textbooks. She clearly wasn't reading, abandoned on the living room sofa. The evening after my arrival, during a slightly awkward family dinner of takeout Chinese food, Madison dropped her bombshell. "So I have amazing news," she announced, barely containing her excitement. "I got accepted to that study abroad program in London I applied for. It starts in September and goes through December." Dad immediately beamed with pride. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I always knew you'd get in." I offered my congratulations, too genuinely happy for her. Madison had never shown much academic ambition, so this seemed like a positive step. "That's great, Mads. What will you be studying?" "Oh, art history and culture and stuff," she said, vaguely waving her hand. "But the really exciting part is that me and the girls are planning this amazing trip before it starts. 2 weeks in Greece. Athens, Santorini, Mykonos. It's going to be incredible for my Instagram." I nodded, trying to stay engaged despite the throbbing in my knee. "When are you thinking of going?" Madison's eyes flickered briefly to Dad before answering. "Well, that's the thing. The only time that works for everyone is mid-June to early July." The realization hit me immediately. Wait, that's exactly when my surgery and initial recovery is scheduled. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Dad suddenly became very interested in his sweet and sour chicken, avoiding eye contact. "I mean, it's not like you're having heart surgery or something," Madison said with a shrug. "Can't you just push it back a little? This is like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me." "Madison, it's not that simple," I explained, trying to keep my voice level. "The timing was specifically planned around my track season. If I delay the surgery, I might not recover in time for—" "It's always about your track stuff," she interrupted, rolling her eyes. "Some of us have other interests besides running in circles, you know." Dad finally spoke up, but not in the way I expected. "Albert, is it possible to reschedule? Even a few weeks could make a difference." I stared at him in disbelief. "Dad, we've discussed this. The surgeon is booked months in advance. If I reschedule, it might be fall before he can fit me in, and then my entire senior season is at risk." Plus, you said you'd take time off work to help me recover. I know, he said, rubbing his temples. It's just Madison's program is important too, and this trip could be really valuable for her personal development. Personal development. Taking selfies on Greek beaches was hardly educational, but I bit my tongue. What about the time you were going to take off work? You can't be in two places at once. Dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Well, that's something we might need to reconsider. Madison would need someone to help her prepare for this trip and get her situated in London afterward. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So you're saying your vacation time is now going to her trip instead of my medical recovery? Don't be so dramatic, Albert Madison sighed theatrically. Dad, tell him he's being dramatic. No one's saying anything definite yet, Dad said weakly. Let's all sleep on it and discuss tomorrow. But over the next few days, the subtle shifts in the household were unmistakable. Dad spent hours researching Greek destinations with Madison. Brochures for Mediterranean cruises appeared on the coffee table. Madison's new passport arrived and she proudly showed it off at dinner. Meanwhile, my pre-surgery paperwork sat untouched on the kitchen counter gathering dust. 4 days after my arrival home, I was awakened around midnight by voices downstairs. Quietly, I made my way to the top of the staircase, where I could hear Dad and Madison talking in the kitchen. The total for the package deal is $10,000 plus. We need to budget another $2,000 for spending money, Madison was saying. And then there's all the new clothes I'll need for London once the summer program starts. That's a lot of money, sweetheart, Dad replied, though his tone wasn't firm. Daddy, I've worked so hard in school, Madison said, her voice taking on the wheedling quality that had worked on him since she was little. And you know how much this means to me. It's not just a vacation. It's an investment in my future. These connections and experiences could lead to amazing opportunities. There was a pause, and I could almost picture Dad melting under her manipulative gaze. And it's not like we can afford both my trip and Albert's surgery right now, she continued. His athletic scholarship already paid for his college. I think it's only fair that I get this opportunity now. My stomach dropped. How had my necessary medical procedure become comparable to her voluntary vacation? You're right, Dad, finally said with a sigh. It is your turn, and Albert's injury isn't life-threatening. He can get the surgery done after your program starts in the fall. Exactly. Madison's voice was triumphant. And honestly, he's being kind of selfish about the whole thing. It's just a sports thing. It's not like his entire future depends on it. But it did. My entire future, the career I'd been working towards since childhood, the professional opportunities that hinged on my final collegiate season, all of it depended on this surgery and timely recovery. How could they not see that? I retreated to my room, my mind racing. The next morning I called Coach Phillips to explain the situation, my voice tight with frustration. They can't do this to you, Albert, he said firmly. Let me make some calls. The athletic department might be able to help cover some costs if your family situation has changed. But when I approached Dad that evening with this potential solution, his response was unexpectedly cold. I've made my decision, Albert, he said, without looking up from his laptop. I've already put down non-refundable deposits for Madison's trip. Your surgery will need to wait until September at least. Dad, you don't understand. By then it might be too late, Dr. Harrison said. Doctors always make things sound more urgent than they are, he interrupted. You can manage with rest and physical therapy until then. Madison deserves this opportunity. As the days passed, the pain in my knee worsened. Simple activities like walking down the driveway to get the mail became excruciating. I tried one last appeal to my father, showing him the most recent email from my surgeon, emphasizing the risks of delay. I understand you're disappointed, Dad said, his tone dismissive. But you need to think about someone besides yourself for once. Madison has been looking forward to this trip for months. That was the moment I realized how completely my father's perspective had been warped. In his mind, Madison's desires would always outweigh my needs, even medical ones. The surgery was officially canceled the next day when Dad called Dr. Harrison's office and withdrew his financial support for the procedure. I watched from my bedroom window as Madison gleefully ordered new swimsuits online, completely unbothered by the fact that her vacation was coming at the expense of my health and future. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain in my knee ever could. With my surgery canceled and my father firmly entrenched in Madison's corner, I faced a devastating reality. Dr. Harrison was furious when he learned the reason for the cancellation. "This is completely irresponsible," he told me during a video consultation. "Albert, delaying this procedure significantly increases your risk of permanent damage. The tear is already affecting the surrounding cartilage. The longer we wait, the more extensive the damage becomes." His words sent a chill through me. "What are my options, Dr. Harrison?" "Medically speaking, you need this surgery as soon as possible. Financially speaking," he paused, clearly uncomfortable. "Well, that's more complicated. Have you looked into personal medical loans?" I had, but with no credit history and no assets, my options were limited. The University Health Center offered payment plans, but I'd still need a significant down payment that I simply didn't have. Meanwhile, Coach Phillips was growing increasingly concerned. He'd arranged for me to meet with Diane Matthews, the athletic department administrator who oversaw scholarships. "I'll be honest with you, Albert," Miss Matthews said during our meeting in her cluttered office. "Your scholarship is performance-based. If you can't compete next season due to this injury, we'll have to reassess." "But the injury is fixable," I insisted. "I just need the surgery." "I understand that," she said sympathetically, "and we want to help. The department can contribute $1,000 toward your medical expenses through our Athlete Emergency Fund, but that still leaves you with a significant shortfall." $1,000 was better than nothing, but it wasn't enough. As I left her office, the reality of my situation crashed down on me. Not only was my health at risk, but also my education, my career prospects, everything I'd worked towards since childhood. Back at home, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Madison flitted around the house, packing and repacking her suitcase, trying on new outfits and taking selfies with different combinations of accessories. She'd occasionally ask my opinion on which sundress looked better for drinks in Santorini, or which sandals would be more Insta-worthy. Each question felt like another twist of the knife. One evening, as I was icing my knee in the living room, Madison bounced in holding two nearly identical white linen shirts. "Which one should I bring for Dad? The one with the textured fabric or the plain one?" I stared at her blankly. "Dad." "Duh." She rolled her eyes. "He's coming with me for the first week to help me get settled. Didn't he tell you?" He hadn't. The betrayal deepened. Not only had my father canceled my surgery and redirected the funds to Madison's vacation, but he was actually going with her, using the very vacation time he'd originally promised to help with my father's recovery. When I confronted him about it later that night, his justification was both predictable and infuriating. "Madison's never traveled internationally before," he explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "She needs guidance. You're an adult, Albert. You can handle things on your own." "Handle things on my own," I repeated incredulously. "Like my canceled surgery, or the physical therapy I can't afford, or the scholarship I might lose." Dad's jaw tightened. "You're being dramatic again. Your knee will be fine for a few more months. And if your scholarship is really at risk, maybe you should consider whether running is the best path forward anyway. There are more practical career options." His dismissal of my athletic career, the one he'd enthusiastically supported throughout my childhood, felt like the final betrayal. But it also sparked something in me, a determination to find a solution without him. The next morning, I called my roommate and closest friend at Westlake, Taylor Richards. Taylor had been my confidant throughout college, the one person who truly understood both my athletic ambitions and my complicated family dynamics. "Your dad did what?" Taylor exclaimed after I explained the situation. "That's beyond messed up, Albert. Tell me about it." I sighed absently, rubbing my throbbing knee. "I don't know what to do." "Come back to campus," Taylor suggested immediately. "My summer sublease," has an extra bedroom. It's nothing fancy, but it's better than staying there watching Madison pack for her vacation that literally came at your expense. Taylor was right. Remaining in that house was both emotionally draining and practically pointless. Dad had made his choice clear, and it wasn't me. When I announced my decision to return to Westlake early, Dad barely reacted. "If that's what you think is best," he said with a shrug, before returning to his packing. Madison was even more dismissive. "Try not to be so negative all the time, Albert," she advised condescendingly. "Your attitude is probably making your knee worse. You should try meditation or something." The 4-hour drive back to Westlake was excruciating both physically and emotionally. Every bump in the road sent shooting pain through my knee, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. The family I thought would always support me had abandoned me when I needed them most. Back on campus, the situation deteriorated further. Despite modified training recommended by the sports medicine team, my knee continued to worsen. During a light practice session, just basic stretching and minimal jogging, something gave way with a sickening pop. I collapsed on the track, the pain so intense that black spots danced before my eyes. Coach Phillips was at my side instantly, his face grim as he examined my now swollen knee. "We need to get you to emergency now," he said, gesturing for 2 teammates to help me up. The emergency room doctor confirmed our worst fears. The meniscus tear had significantly worsened with additional damage to the surrounding ligaments. When he learned that a recommended surgery had been canceled for non-medical reasons, his professional demeanor briefly cracked. "This should never have happened," he said, shaking his head. "You're looking at a much more extensive procedure now with a longer recovery time and potentially long-term implications for your mobility." I texted my father from the hospital bed, a simple message stating the facts: knee completely gave out. In ER now. Doctor says damage, much worse surgery now, more complicated and expensive. His response came hours later, after I'd been discharged with a heavy brace and prescription pain medication. "Sorry to hear that. Try to rest it. Madison and I leave tomorrow morning. We'll have limited cell service for a few days." That's when I scrolled through Madison's Instagram and saw her latest post, a flat-lay photograph of her passport, sunglasses, and a wad of cash with the caption, "Grease-bound. Thanks, Daddy, for making dreams come true, blessed. Travel bug Daddy's girl." The post had hundreds of likes already, including one from my father's rarely used account. The comments were filled with friends expressing jealousy over her amazing dad and her dream vacation. One of her friends had commented, "How much did this set your dad back? Must be thousands." To which Madison had replied, "Let's just say his accountant is going to have questions. Lol. Worth every penny, though." I threw my phone across the room, immediately regretting it, when I had to hobble painfully to retrieve it. The injustice burned like fire. My father hadn't just chosen Madison over me, he'd spent significantly more on her vacation than my surgery would have cost. According to Madison's own posts, they were staying at luxury resorts, had booked private tours, and had even arranged for a chartered yacht day in Mykonos. The final blow came the next day, when Coach Phillips called me into his office for a meeting with the athletic director, James Thornton. "Albert, I'll be direct." Director Thornton began, his expression serious. "With your current prognosis, we have concerns about your ability to compete next season. We value you as a student and as an athlete, but we need to discuss the terms of your scholarship." The message was clear: no competition, no scholarship. Without surgery, I couldn't compete. Without my scholarship, I couldn't afford tuition for my senior year. Without my degree, the career opportunities I'd been working toward would vanish. As I left the athletic complex, leaning heavily on my crutches, I realized I'd reached my breaking point. My father had sacrificed my future for Madison's vacation, and now everything I'd worked for was slipping away. Something had to change, and I realized with sudden clarity that it had to start with me. The aftermath of my knee collapse was a haze of pain, both physical and emotional. The sports medicine team fitted me with a more substantial brace and prescribed stronger pain medication, but these were merely band-aids on a wound that required surgery to truly heal. Each night I'd lie awake in Taylor's spare bedroom, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with a toxic blend of anger, fear, and betrayal. Taylor, to his credit, was the friend I desperately needed during this time. He rearranged furniture to make the apartment more accessible, drove me to medical appointments, and even sat with me through particularly rough nights, when the pain was too intense for sleep. "Have you heard anything more from your dad?" he asked one evening as we picked at a pizza neither of us had much appetite for. I shook my head. Just some generic vacation photos in the family group chat. Madison lounging by infinity pools, Dad smiling with some ouzo at a taverna. They look like they don't have a care in the world. "While you're here dealing with this," Taylor gestured to my immobilized leg. "It's unbelievable, man." What made it worse was discovering through casual social media stalking just how extravagant their trip had become. Madison had posted a video tour of their suite at a 5-star resort in Santorini, complete with private plunge pool and caldera views, casually mentioning that Daddy upgraded us because the standard rooms were too basic. Another post showed her on a private yacht excursion, champagne in hand, with a caption about how her father had chartered it last minute because the group tours were too crowded with tourists. The money being casually thrown around on these luxuries was staggering. Based on the resorts they were staying at and the experiences they were documenting, my conservative estimate put their spending at well over $12,000, more than double what my surgery and recovery would have cost. The following week brought another devastating blow. I'd been communicating with Dr. Harrison about my worsened condition, sending him the emergency room reports and imaging. His response was grim. "Albert, I've reviewed everything he said during our video call," his expression somber. "The additional damage is significant. We're now looking at a much more complex procedure with a recovery timeline of 9 to 12 months, not the 6 we originally projected. And I have to be honest with you, even with successful surgery, there's now a higher risk of long-term limitations." The words hit me like a physical blow. What kind of limitations? It's hard to say with certainty until we get in there, but potentially reduced speed, less lateral mobility, possibly chronic pain with intense activity. Professional track might still be possible, but it would be a much more difficult road. I ended the call in a daze. 9 to 12 months of recovery meant my entire senior season was effectively gone. And with it, my best chance at professional recruiting, Olympic team consideration, everything I'd been working toward. That afternoon, I received an official email from the university athletic department. "Due to medical ineligibility for the upcoming season, your athletic scholarship has been placed under review. Please schedule an appointment with the financial aid office to discuss options for the coming academic year." I'd lost my health, my athletic prospects, and now my scholarship, all because my father had prioritized Madison's vacation over my medical needs. The realization was like a dam breaking inside me. I sat on the edge of the bed, my injured leg throbbing in its brace, and for the first time since this ordeal began, I allowed myself to break down completely. Taylor found me there an hour later, still sitting in the same position, my face streaked with dried tears. "Albert," he said quietly, sitting beside me, "this can't go on. We need to find another way." "What way?" I asked hollowly. "I can't afford the surgery on my own. I can't compete without the surgery. I can't keep my scholarship if I don't compete. It's a perfect trap." "Then we break the trap," Taylor said with unexpected firmness. "You're not alone in this, even if your family has let you down. We start by getting you proper medical care regardless of your father." Taylor's determination sparked something in me. He was right. I'd been so focused on my father's betrayal that I'd fallen into passive despair. It was time to take control of my own situation. The next morning, I called the University Health Center and scheduled a meeting with their financial counselor. Meanwhile, Taylor reached out to our circle of friends on the track team, explaining my situation. By evening, he'd organized a small gathering in our apartment, 6 of my closest teammates, all determined to help. "We've been talking," said Marcus, our team captain. "This is bullshit what your family did to you. The team has your back. We're setting up a crowdfunding page," added Jessica, who specialized in long jump. Between the athletic department alumni and our social networks, we think we can make a significant dent in your medical costs. Their support was overwhelming, but even more surprising was the call I received the following day from Jason Reynolds, a Westlake track alumnus who'd graduated 5 years earlier and gone on to compete internationally before starting a successful sports management company. "Coach Phillips told me about your situation," Jason said when I answered. "I'd like to meet with you if you're up for it." We arranged to meet at a cafe near campus that afternoon. Jason, athletic and confident at 30 years old, listened intently as I explained the full situation from the initial diagnosis to my father's betrayal to my current predicament. "I went through something similar my sophomore year," Jason revealed after I finished. "Different circumstances. Mine was a stress fracture in my foot that nearly ended my career, but I understand the fear of losing everything you've worked for." "How did you handle it?" I asked. "Not well at first," he admitted with a wry smile. "But I eventually learned that setbacks like these test more than your body. They test your resolve, your creativity, your ability to find new paths forward. The athletes who overcome aren't just physically talented, they're resourceful and determined." Then he leaned forward, his expression serious. "Here's what I'm proposing, Albert. My company has a foundation that supports athletes facing medical challenges. We can cover the costs of your surgery and initial rehabilitation. In return, when you're recovered, I'd like you to intern with us, sharing your experience with other athletes, helping develop our support programs." I stared at him in disbelief. "You'd do that for someone you just met?" Jason smiled. "The track community takes care of its own. Coach Phillips vouched for your character and your talent. That's good enough for me." For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of genuine hope. With Jason's offer, the impossible suddenly seemed possible again. The surgery could happen. Recovery could begin. My future wasn't necessarily lost. That evening, I made one final attempt to reach my father. Not for financial help, that ship had sailed, but simply to inform him of my decision to proceed with surgery independently. The call went to voicemail, so I sent a text. "Instead, I've found a way to get my surgery without your help. I'm scheduled for next week. I wanted you to know that while I can't understand or forgive your choice right now, I'm finding my own path forward." His response came hours later. "Glad you worked something out. Madison and I are extending our stay another week since we're having such a wonderful time. I hope your surgery goes well." No apology. No acknowledgement of his role in the situation. Not even a question about how I'd managed to arrange the surgery or who was helping me. Just information about their extended vacation. That text was the final confirmation I needed. My father had made his choice clear, and now I was making mine. I would have the surgery focus on my recovery and rebuild my life with or without the family that had abandoned me when I needed them most. As I set my phone aside, my knee throbbing with its now familiar pain, I felt an unexpected sense of clarity. The path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time since this ordeal began, it was a path I was choosing for myself. With Jason Reynolds' financial support secured, and my surgery scheduled for the following week, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. There was still significant work to be done, both practical and emotional, but at least now I had a way forward. My first priority was understanding my medical and financial situation independently from my father. I scheduled a meeting with a patient advocate at the University Health Center, a compassionate woman named Eleanor, who specialized in helping students navigate complex healthcare decisions. "Since you're 25, you're still on your father's insurance plan under the Affordable Care Act," Eleanor explained, reviewing my documents. "The good news is that he can't remove you from that plan until the next open enrollment period. The challenging news is that you'll still need to coordinate with the insurance company directly, since it seems your father isn't being cooperative." Eleanor helped me contact the insurance provider, establish my own communication channel with them, and understand exactly what would be covered. Jason's foundation would handle the remaining costs, including the deductible and copays that my father had originally promised to cover. Next, I met with the University Financial Aid Office to address my scholarship situation. Without my athletic scholarship, I wouldn't be able to afford my senior year tuition. Your situation is unusual but not unprecedented, said Martin Griffith, the financial aid director. Given the medical nature of your athletic ineligibility, you may qualify for a medical hardship waiver, which would allow you to retain a portion of your scholarship while you recover. There was also the possibility of academic scholarships based on my solid GPA, as well as emergency hardship grants for students facing unexpected financial crises. By the end of our meeting, Martin had outlined a potential patchwork of funding sources that could keep me in school, even without my full athletic scholarship. The final piece of the puzzle was post-surgical care. I couldn't return to my father's house for recovery, and Taylor's apartment, while offered generously, wasn't ideal for someone with limited mobility. We might have a solution for that too, Coach Phillips said when I met with him to update him on my progress. The athletic department maintains 2 accessible apartments for visiting coaches and athletes with disabilities. One of them is vacant for the summer. I've already spoken with Director Thornton, and he's approved you using it during your initial recovery period. As each piece fell into place, I felt increasingly confident in my decision to proceed independently. I was building a support system not of family but of friends, mentors, and compassionate strangers who recognized the injustice of my situation and wanted to help. 2 days before my scheduled surgery, I received an unexpected text from Madison. Heard you're getting your surgery anyway. Don't know why you made such a drama about Dad paying for it if you could afford it yourself all along. Anyway, hope it goes well, I guess. Her message revealed just how completely she'd misunderstood or been misled about the situation. In her mind, I'd simply found money I'd had access to all along rather than relying on the generosity of others after being abandoned by my own family. I considered explaining everything to her: the crowdfunding my teammates had organized, Jason's foundation, the patient advocate and financial aid officers who'd worked to help me. I wanted her to understand that her luxury vacation had come at the cost of not just my health, but my dignity, forcing me to seek charity for a necessary medical procedure. But what would that accomplish? Madison had shown no empathy throughout this ordeal. She'd watched me struggle with pain, knowing her vacation was the reason I couldn't get treatment, and had never once expressed genuine concern. Instead, I simply replied, "I'm glad you enjoyed your trip. My surgery is being covered by people who actually care about my well-being. I hope someday you understand what that means." I blocked her number after sending the text. It was a small act of self-protection, but it felt significant. A boundary established, a toxic influence temporarily removed as I prepared for the challenging recovery ahead. The day before surgery, I received a call from my father. It was the first time we'd spoken directly since I'd left home weeks earlier. "Albert," he began, his tone cautious, "Madison showed me your text. What did you mean about people who actually care? We're your family. Of course we care." The audacity of his statement left me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice, it was steadier than I expected. "Dad, you canceled my necessary surgery so Madison could go on vacation. You knew it could permanently damage my athletic career. You knew it put my scholarship at risk. And you did it anyway." "You're exaggerating the situation," he said dismissively. "Your doctor was being overly cautious, and Madison's opportunity was time-sensitive. So was my surgery," I countered. "And now the damage is worse. The recovery will be longer, and my chances at a professional track career have been significantly reduced. All because you decided her Instagram photos from Greece were more important than my health and future." There was a long pause before he spoke again. "I think you're being unfair. I've supported your track activities for years. Madison deserved her turn to have something special. This wasn't about taking turns, Dad. This was about a necessary medical procedure versus a luxury vacation. The fact that you can't see the difference tells me everything I need to know. So what are you saying?" His voice had an edge now. "That you're handling everything yourself from now on. That you don't need your family anymore." I took a deep breath, choosing my next words carefully. "What I'm saying is that I've found people who support me when it matters, not just when it's convenient or when I'm winning medals that make them proud. I'm saying that I'm going to have this surgery focus on my recovery and rebuild my life. And right now I need to do that without the stress and hurt that you and Madison bring. That sounds like an ultimatum, he said coldly. It's not an ultimatum, Dad. It's a boundary. I need to focus on my health right now, and I can't do that while trying to understand why my own father chose a vacation over my medical needs. After another lengthy silence, he sighed. Fine. Have it your way. Good luck with your surgery. The call ended, and I sat staring at my phone, a complex mix of emotions washing over me. I'd stood my ground, established my independence, and made it clear that his behavior was unacceptable. But there was no satisfaction in it, only a hollow ache where family support should have been. The morning of my surgery arrived with unexpected calm. Taylor drove me to the hospital where Dr. Harrison greeted me with professional warmth. You've been through quite an ordeal to get here, he said as the pre-surgical preparations began. But you made it, and we're going to do everything we can to get you back on track literally and figuratively. As the anesthesia began to take effect, my last conscious thought wasn't of my father or Madison, or even my uncertain athletic future. Instead, I thought of the people who had rallied around me: Taylor, Coach Phillips, Jason, my teammates, the university staff who'd gone above and beyond to help. They were proof that family isn't always defined by blood, but by who shows up when you truly need them. I awoke from surgery to find Taylor dozing in a chair beside my hospital bed. The procedure had taken longer than anticipated, nearly 4 hours, due to the extensive damage that had developed since my original diagnosis. According to Dr. Harrison, they'd repaired the meniscus tear, addressed the ligament damage, and removed damaged cartilage fragments. The good news is that we got everything cleaned up in there, Dr. Harrison explained during his post-operative visit. The less good news is that your recovery timeline is going to be on the longer end of what we discussed, likely closer to 12 months than 9. But with proper rehabilitation and patience, I'm still optimistic about your long-term prognosis. That first week of recovery was a blur of pain medication, physical therapy evaluations, and awkward adjustments to life with an immobilized leg. True to his word, Coach Phillips had arranged for me to use one of the accessible apartments on campus, a ground-floor unit with widened doorways, grab bars in the bathroom, and proximity to the athletic facilities where I'd be doing my rehabilitation. Taylor helped me get settled, and a rotation of teammates ensured I had regular visitors and assistants with meals and basic needs. Jason Reynolds checked in every few days, both to see how I was doing and to update me on the foundation's coverage of my medical expenses. Everything's been processed smoothly, he assured me during one call. Just focus on your recovery. The financial side is handled. It was during this first week of recovery that the unexpected began to unfold thousands of miles away in Greece. I first heard about it from Coach Phillips, who stopped by with a care package from the athletic department and an odd expression on his face. Have you heard from your father recently? He asked as I unwrapped the package to find team-branded sweats modified to fit over my bulky knee brace. Not since before the surgery, I replied. Why? Coach Phillips hesitated. There's been some major airline strike action across Europe. It's all over the news. Thousands of travelers stranded, including in Greece. I just wondered if your family had been affected. I hadn't been following the news during my recovery, but a quick internet search confirmed what Coach Phillips had mentioned. A massive, multi-airline strike had effectively shut down air travel across much of Europe, with Greece particularly impacted due to secondary strikes by airport workers. A part of me felt a petty satisfaction at the thought of Madison's perfect vacation being disrupted, but I pushed the feeling aside. I haven't heard anything. I'm sure they'll figure it out. Later that evening, curiosity got the better of me. I unblocked Madison's number and checked her Instagram. What I found was a stream of increasingly frantic posts. Stuck at Athens airport for 8 hours. This is literally the worst travel nightmare. Stranded. Update. All flights canceled for the next 3 days. Hotel rooms in Athens. All booked. Currently sleeping on the airport floor. crying, worst day ever. Dad trying to find us a way home, but everything is chaos. Lost our deposit on the Santorini hotel too. Can this get any worse? There was even a video of Madison having what could only be described as a public meltdown at the airport, screaming at airline staff, while my father tried unsuccessfully to calm her down. The post had thousands of views and hundreds of comments, most expressing second-hand embarrassment rather than sympathy. I felt a complex mix of emotions watching her distress. On one hand, it was hard to muster much sympathy given how callously she'd dismissed my medical needs in favor of this very trip. On the other hand, being stranded in a foreign country was genuinely stressful, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. My contemplation was interrupted by a text from an unknown international number. "Albert, it's Dad. Using a temporary Greek number, since my phone doesn't work here. We're stuck in Athens. All flights canceled. Madison hysterical. Need to get home as soon as possible. Can you check if there are any flights from Athens to Detroit in next 3 days? Hotel internet not working." The irony was almost too perfect. After abandoning me to my own devices for a medical crisis, my father was now reaching out for help with his travel crisis. I considered ignoring the message entirely, but ultimately decided to take the high road. "Just had major surgery yesterday. Limited mobility. Try the American Embassy for assistance, or contact your credit card company. Many have emergency travel services. Good luck." I didn't hear back immediately, but over the next few days, Madison's social media told the story they'd eventually secured exorbitantly priced tickets on a circuitous route, home Athens to Istanbul to London to New York to Detroit. Lost several non-refundable hotel deposits and had to pay for 5 unexpected nights in an overpriced Athens airport hotel. A post from Madison, a week after the airport meltdown, summed it up. "Finally home after the vacation from hell. Lost thousands in deposits, spent Dad's emergency fund on basic survival, and my skin is ruined from stress breakouts. Never. Traveling internationally again. Home at last, nightmare over." The financial impact of their extended unplanned stay and complex rebooking appeared significant. According to Madison's various posts, they'd lost nearly $4,000 in non-refundable deposits and had to spend another $6,000 on emergency accommodations and new flights. Meanwhile, my recovery was progressing steadily. The initial post-surgical pain began to subside, and I started the first phase of physical therapy. Simple movements designed to maintain muscle tone without disturbing the healing tissues. Dr. Harrison was pleased with my progress during my 2-week follow-up appointment. "You're doing everything right," he said, examining my knee. "The swelling is down, the incisions are healing cleanly, and your range of motion is exactly where we want it at this stage." Jason Reynolds continued to be an unexpected blessing. Beyond covering my medical expenses, he'd begun mentoring me remotely, discussing potential career paths in sports management, athletic consulting, and coaching that could leverage my experience and education, even if professional. Competition wasn't in my future. The skills that make a great athlete: discipline, strategic thinking, performance under pressure, are incredibly valuable in business, he explained during one of our calls. "Don't think of this injury as the end of your athletic career. Think of it as the beginning of your athletic-adjacent career." As I approached the 1-month mark post-surgery, I received another unexpected text from my father. "Need to talk. Important. Call when you can." Curiosity won out over caution, and I called him that evening. "Albert," he began, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "How's the recovery going?" "Better than expected," I replied neutrally. "What's going on?" He sighed heavily. "I'm facing some challenges at work. The firm is conducting an audit of recent expenditures, including cash withdrawals. They're questioning some of the money I accessed for the Greece trip." This was surprising. My father had been with his accounting firm for over 20 years and had always been meticulously careful with finances. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that could lead to an internal investigation," he admitted. "I may have categorized some personal expenses as business-related, and the amounts were substantial enough to trigger red flags. I let that sink in. My straight-laced, rule-following father had potentially committed expense fraud to fund Madison's luxury vacation, the very vacation he'd prioritized over my necessary medical procedure. "I see," I said carefully. "That sounds serious." "It is," he confirmed, "and it's made me reconsider some recent decisions." "Albert, Dad," I interrupted, not ready for whatever justification or half-apology he might offer. "I'm sorry you're facing problems at work. I truly am. But I'm 1 month post-major surgery, focusing on a challenging recovery and rebuilding my academic and athletic future without the support I counted on from my family. I don't have the emotional bandwidth right now to help you process your regrets." There was a long silence before he responded. "That's fair. More than fair. I just wanted you to know that things aren't. They're not working out the way I expected." "They rarely do," I replied, thinking of my own dramatically altered path. "I hope you figure things out." As I ended the call, I felt a strange sense of peace. My father was experiencing the consequences of his choices, just as I was dealing with the consequences of his choices for me. The difference was that I had found strength and support in unexpected places, while he was discovering that the daughter he'd sacrificed so much for was ill-equipped to help him through his own crisis. It wasn't revenge. I hadn't orchestrated any of this, but there was a certain poetic justice to how events were unfolding. Sometimes the universe delivers its own form of balance, no action required. 6 months passed, each day marked by the steady rhythm of rehabilitation exercises, physical therapy appointments, and gradual improvements in my knee's strength and flexibility. The surgical scars faded from angry red to pale pink, then to thin silver lines that Dr. Harrison assured me would eventually be barely noticeable. "Your progress is remarkable," he said during my 6-month follow-up. "You're actually ahead of schedule on most of our recovery metrics. How does it feel subjectively?" "Better every week," I answered honestly. "I still notice it during longer walks or when I try to jog, but the constant pain is gone, and I haven't needed pain medication in months." "That's excellent news," Dr. Harrison smiled. "I think we can start introducing more dynamic movements into your rehabilitation protocol. Not running yet, but more sport-specific training to prepare for that eventual step." The expanded rehabilitation program coincided with other positive developments in my life. The university had approved my medical hardship waiver, allowing me to retain 70% of my athletic scholarship despite my inability to compete. Combined with 2 merit-based academic scholarships I'd secured, my senior year tuition was fully covered. I'd also begun a part-time remote internship with Jason's sports management company, learning the business side of athletics from the ground up. The flexible hours worked perfectly with my rehabilitation schedule, and the experience was opening my eyes to career possibilities I'd never previously considered. As my life stabilized and improved, news from home arrived in sporadic, often surprising bursts. Madison's study abroad program in London had ended abruptly after just 2 months, not because of any external factors this time, but due to her own academic failings. They expected me to actually do all the readings and write these massive papers, she complained in a phone call to me, that I hadn't expected. It was supposed to be about experiencing the culture, not sitting in a library all day. So unfair. Her tone suggested she expected sympathy for being held to basic academic standards, but I offered none. "Most study abroad programs are academically rigorous, Madison. That's why they count toward your degree." "Whatever," she sighed. "Dad's super mad about it since he paid for the whole semester up front, and they only refunded like 30%. But honestly, I'm glad to be home. London was cold and rainy all the time anyway." My father's situation had deteriorated further since our brief conversation months earlier. The audit at his firm had indeed uncovered financial irregularities, not just related to the Greece trip, but a pattern of increasingly blurred lines between personal and business expenses over the previous year, all coinciding with his escalating financial support of Madison's lifestyle. He hadn't been fired, which was something of a miracle given the circumstances, but he'd been demoted, placed on probation, and required to repay all misappropriated funds. The financial strain, combined with the professional humiliation, had taken a visible toll when I finally saw him in person during a brief visit home for Thanksgiving. He looked older, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. Madison still lived at home but spent most of her time out with friends, treating the house like a hotel and showing little awareness of the financial constraints her father now operated under. It was during that visit, while Madison was out, and we sat alone in the kitchen late one evening, that my father finally offered the apology I'd stopped expecting. "I made a terrible mistake, Albert," he said quietly, staring into his cup of tea. "Several mistakes, actually. I convinced myself that Madison needed more support, more experiences, more everything, that her happiness depended on me giving her whatever she wanted. And in the process, I failed you completely." I waited, letting him continue without interruption. "When you needed me, truly needed me for something essential, I chose her wants over your needs. I can't undo that decision or the consequences it had for your health and your career. But I want you to know that I recognize how wrong I was, and I'm truly deeply sorry." His apology was sincere, I could see that. But it came after months of pain, struggle, and rebuilding my life without his support. I couldn't simply pretend none of that had happened. "I appreciate you saying that," I said carefully, "and I believe you mean it. But trust isn't rebuilt with a single conversation. It takes time and consistent actions." He nodded, accepting this without argument. "I understand. I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness, just the chance to try to be the father you deserve going forward." We began rebuilding our relationship cautiously, after that regular phone calls, occasional visits when my rehabilitation schedule allowed. I maintained clear boundaries, particularly around financial matters and any situation involving Madison, but I allowed myself to reconnect with the father I remembered from childhood, the one who had stood proudly at the finish line, stopwatch in hand. As my senior year progressed, an unexpected opportunity emerged. Coach Phillips approached me about becoming a student assistant coach for the track team. "You have a unique perspective now," he explained. "You understand both the technical aspects of competition and the mental challenges of dealing with injury and setbacks. The younger athletes could learn a lot from you." I accepted the position, discovering a genuine passion for coaching that I'd never anticipated. Helping other athletes refine their technique, develop their mental toughness, and navigate the challenges of collegiate athletics gave me a sense of purpose that filled much of the void left by my own competitive career. By the time graduation approached, I had developed a clear vision for my future. Jason had offered me a full-time position with his company, with a focus on developing support programs for athletes facing career-threatening injuries. Additionally, I'd been accepted to a master's program in sports psychology that I could complete part-time while working. The journey from that devastating moment when my father canceled my surgery to the confident, purpose-driven graduate I became was neither straightforward nor easy. There were dark days of pain and doubt, moments when I questioned whether I'd ever fully recover, and times when the sense of betrayal threatened to consume me. But through it all, I discovered an essential truth: family isn't defined solely by blood relations. It's created through actions, support, and showing up when it matters most. Taylor, Coach Phillips, Jason, my teammates, Dr. Harrison. These people became my chosen family during my darkest hours, demonstrating the kind of unconditional support I'd wrongly expected would come only from my father. I also learned that true strength isn't about never needing help. It's about having the courage to accept help when necessary. My initial resistance to seeking support, born from pride and a lifetime of self-reliance, nearly cost me everything. Accepting the generosity of others didn't diminish me. It empowered me to heal and grow in ways I couldn't have managed alone. Perhaps most importantly, I discovered that while we can't control the actions of others, even those closest to us, we always retain control over our own responses. My father's betrayal could have been the beginning of a downward spiral of bitterness and victim mentality. Instead, it became the catalyst for building resilience, establishing healthy boundaries, and creating a future defined by my choices rather than his. Today my knee bears the scars of both the surgery and the journey that followed. It will never be quite the same as it was before Dr. Harrison was right about certain limitations that would remain, but it's strong enough for a different kind of race than the one I originally envisioned for myself. And perhaps that's the most valuable lesson of all sometimes. Our greatest setbacks lead us to paths we never would have discovered otherwise. Paths that ultimately prove more meaningful than those we originally planned to follow. If you've ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal or disappointment, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. How did you find the strength to move forward? What unexpected support systems emerged when you needed them most? Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear that. There's always a way forward, even when those we trust the most let us down. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember that sometimes when one door closes, it's up to us to build an entirely new house.